morning. Welcome to Lifting Your Spirit, a monthly broadcast about spiritual life and how we go about lifting our spirits. I'm Joel Grossman. I'm an Interfaith Minister, Director of Spiritual Services with Constellation Hospice here in Newburyport, and a spiritual coach on a donation basis.
And I'm Ted Jones. I'm a meditation instructor at the North Shore Insight Meditation Center, and also a retreat leader exploring the intersection of Christian and Buddhist meditation traditions.
Our show is based on 4 principles. The first one being that everybody's spiritual. Sometimes we're conscious and active in our spiritual life, sometimes not at all, but we always have a spirit.
So the second principle is that there are many ways to lift your spirit, not only through religious practice, but also through nature, art, human relationships, and service to others.
And 3, each person's path is unique. And it may change at times or not, but everybody has their own unique spiritual path.
And fourth, it's important to respect your spiritual journey, trusting that one step leads to another, and to respect other people's unique spiritual journey, regardless of how different that may be from your own. We're not here to convince you of the benefits of any particular approach. Rather, we're just offering food for thought.
And we're very happy to have as our guests today Deborah Szabo and Tuala Sullivan. They're involved in the practice of creative writing, poetry in particular. And that's what our show is going to focus on today, how we lift our spirit through writing, reading, poetry, and the like. Deb is a native New Yorker. She has been a high school English teacher for almost half a century, starting in the Boston Public Schools and spending the past 40 years at Newburyport High School. Her greatest joy is in watching students discover the power of words to facilitate self-expression and to forge connections. Tuala Sullivan is a young poet who will graduate from Newburyport High School this June. She recently won 2nd place in the state Poetry Out Loud competition, making her an alternate to represent Massachusetts in the National Poetry Out Loud Finals in Washington, D.C. She has performed at local Juneteenth celebrations, Whitman on Walls, the Newburyport Favorite Poem Project, which Deb puts on every year for how many years?
This will be the 21st.
21st. Wow, great. And the Newburyport/Ipswich District Court Cultural Diversity Appreciation and Celebration, better known as the DCCDDAC, among others. Thanks. So we start our show off asking for our guests to just share about their spiritual lives. So whoever would like to go ahead and do that.
I think you should go first.
I always listen to my students. So my spiritual life, I didn't grow up with much of a traditional spiritual life. My father escaped the Holocaust through a very long and remarkable story. And so what I always heard from him was, if there's a God, where's my family? Which was more like, if there's a God, there's my family. You know? But so I got that message very deeply. And yet, a lot of things kind of felt spiritual to me. Now, I guess for me there was always a difference between organized religion and my own personal spirit, and they didn't have too much jiving. So somewhere, I guess in my early 20s, one of my friends got very interested in Buddhism, and she kept telling me I needed to investigate it. And so since she was my best friend, I did. And then I became very interested in Buddhism. And so I've had a meditation practice for I don't know, probably 50 years. And I've just read a lot and tried a lot of things, but I have to say my spiritual life feels more dominated by music and literature and my relationships with people than any organized religion. I guess I'm a lapsed Jew. I'm very culturally Jewish, but I don't know much about the real religious part.
Well, that really speaks to what the show is all about, that there's many ways to be spiritual and lift our spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Tuala?
I mean, my grandparents are Catholic, and I'm baptized Catholic, but I don't really go to church very much at all. When I do, I go with them like every once in a while. But I never really felt that organized religion was a part of my own spirituality. Honestly, I kind of agree that what I find comfort in and what I find faith in is the people around me that I'm close to. Music, poetry definitely has been a way for me to, just find comfort and confidence. Yeah.
Great.
I'm very interested from both of your viewpoints of how poetry in particular, since that's a big part of this discussion going forward, how that feeds your spirit, both from the point of view of writing it and also of reading it, and how that sort of evolved for you over time. We'll let Tuala go first.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I started writing poetry my junior year, so last year. And actually, I started writing it because I found Ms. Szabo's Poetry Soup, which was just an open mic event that students come to and listen and write and read their own poetry, and it was just a really awesome event, and it really got me into poetry. And I found it as a way that I was able to express a lot of feelings that I never really knew how to get out there. For a long time, I kind of just had a lot of emotions that I was trying to deal with on my own. I didn't really know how to talk about it. And poetry just gives me a way to kind of funnel that energy into something that is powerful and beautiful, and gives me a way to feel confident and secure. And then reading poetry, do you mean read just reading other people's words, or reading it out loud?
Oh, I would think more of reading people, both of those actually. But you talked about the what was that soup that
Poetry soup.
Poetry soup.
Yeah.
That hearing people there, hearing people recite poetry, but also reading it.
Well, for other people's work, I totally think that one of the best ways to connect with other people is to hear their words and find something in it that you resonate with, and so I have just been heavily inspired by the poets in my lives. A lot of them are my friends. Most of them are my friends, the people that I hear at Poetry Soup. So it's a nice insight into their lives and who they are.
So you're sharing that Miss Szabo, or as I know, as Debbie. I hope you don't mind if I refer to you in my way as Debbie.
No. I feel honored that she gave me a Mrs. because half the time the kids just go, Szabo. So she's being on very good behavior. Thank you, Tuala.
So you've spent years working with young people, with your students, and introducing them to the creative writing experience, particularly poetry. Could you say what you've noticed the effect of that has been?
Yeah, I mean, while you're talking, I'm thinking, well, I guess this is my spiritual. I mean, teaching is my spiritual practice.
Yeah.
You can't stand in front of a bunch of teenagers and be anywhere else. you talk about insight meditation.
Yes, yeah.
You're either present or you're dead. I mean, Poetry Soup. Hats off to the student. It really was generated by students when I started at Newburyport High School. I mean, I loved writing and I loved creative writing, and I would inject a little assignment wherever I could, but there wasn't a lot of room in the curriculum for creative writing. And so with a group of students who had sort of said, well, can't we do more writing? We started a creative writing club. And then it was a few students who said, can't we have a sort of like a poetry reading thing, like we could do it at night, we don't have to be at school. And that was right up my alley because, I'm a child of the 60s, and I always wanted to be I mean, I did hang out in Greenwich Village and, try to wear white lipstick and a black turtleneck. I should have worn my black turtleneck, but, and it wasn't quite like that, but we did get together and start. The kids named it Poetry Soup. And actually, one of the founders showed up at Poetry Soup. We were there with Becky, who is now in her 50s. She just emailed me out of nowhere and was thinking about a career change and is becoming an art teacher. And it was the night before Poetry Soup, and I said, oh, you got to come. And she came to Poetry Soup, which was really kind of cool because she was an original founder. And she got to see how it's really blossomed. It used to be a handful of kids, and anyone I knew who had ever written anything ever. So, which wasn't so bad, actually, because when we started, I remember Andre Dubus came once before. This was in the early 80s. I mean, so anyway. So it's blossomed into this larger thing. And I feel like it is what Tuala was. That's my experience, too. And there are a range of kids, and I'd like to think some of those kids have become friends because they've shared from a very deep, honest place. I don't have to lecture the students. They're automatically, for the most part, pretty respectful, and they know that they can talk about who they really are and what they're really feeling there. And poetry is just a neat vehicle. If for no other reason, then there is music involved, and so many teenagers do love music. And that is one of the things that sets poetry apart from prose. And also, of course, the fact that it tends to be shorter than reading a novel or your autobiography. So I don't even remember what the question was. Did I answer it?
How you've noticed it's affected the students that you've worked with?
Oh, right. Well, it has. One of a real great joy is when students come early. Some of them come freshman or sophomore year, and then I actually get to see their growth in not only in their writing skills but in their confidence. Tuala was, I have to say, outrageous. When Tuala told me she hadn't written a poem, because I only met Tuala last year, and as soon as she got up, that's why when you asked me about coming on the show, I said, oh, can I bring a student? Because when Tuala reads, I don't know where she goes or what she does, but I've heard, I can hear her read the same poem 20 times and get teary every time, because the connection is so intense between the reciter, the writer of the poem, the listener. It is really what I would almost call, without getting too corny, a religious experience, because we are all really connected, and it's a result of all three of those: how beautifully the thing is written, how beautifully the thing is recited, and the listener's receptivity, which is another thing I think about Poetry Soup. It was interesting because someone was asking the kids about would they want creative writing in the curriculum, because we meet at night. We meet once a week at night, and once a month it's Poetry Soup, and the other 3 meetings are creative writing class. And I was sure that some of them would say, oh, during the day would be so much better. It's such a bummer to come out at night. But most of the kids didn't, because, and I think part of it is because at night they're out of their school mode and in a more receptive mode. I'm sorry to say, one would like to believe that they're receptive all through the school day, but that is not it's not reality, And also Poetry Soup, we're back at the high school since COVID. But before COVID, we met at a lot of different places. We met at tea shops and coffee shops. There was a bagel shop for a while. We met at at the shopping center, which didn't work out because there was an espresso machine making a lot of noise. But and we landed at Jabberwocky, which was far and away my favorite. We were there for many, many years because the students could hang out. If they came early, they'd look at books, and they would always kick us out at 9 o'clock. And kids would still be looking at books. So that was great. But that's also part of that, not to diss school, because, of course, I love school. But I don't know. Ideally, as I said, there is something also to the venue, I guess, and where you are and when you're there, just in terms of the listener being more receptive. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Being outside the school does seem to have, outside the school day, but it's at the school.
Yes.
But there's no grades.
Right.
And there's no sort of rigid curriculum, and that there's a tremendous benefit to certainly curriculum and organized teaching and stuff like that. But what gets lost sometimes is a real promotion of kids' creativity, and that there isn't a creative writing class in the curriculum is kind of a
well, it is in the curriculum. We just moved it from during the day, when students had a lot of other pulls on them.
right. Okay.
To meeting at night. So 3 out of 4 times we have a regular creative writing class. When Poetry Soup happens, anybody in the school can come. You
Okay,
don't have
so
to.
that's,
You don't have to be a
that's
member of the class.
The thing that's different. The other part is actually within the school
Right.
curriculum.
It's within the school curriculum. But it's not within the school day. There are other classes like that called flex classes. Are they still called flex classes? I think they're called something else now.
Credit to be on the school day.
That.
Credit beyond the school day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So because that's a topic for a whole other
Yes.
other day. But
Yeah.
they're just the kids are pulled in a lot of directions during the day.
Sure.
Well, what I just heard you talking about, Debbie, is the ideal of a religion where people come together and you're supposed to be more in touch with yourself, your values, what really matters to you. In some congregations, that something can be shared. A lot of times it's more within, more personal. And so I'm putting the two together, that it doesn't have to be in a religious institution with their framework. When people come together and they get in touch and they share, it's a spiritual, uplifting experience. Yeah. Now, we were hearing about how your poetry touches Debbie. Would you mind sharing one?
Oh, one of my poems?
Yeah.
Oh. I wouldn't mind. Why are you looking at me like that?
I don't know. We're sitting very close. We've never been this close. I do love her, but it's a little creepy. Okay, I'll just stay with you.
No, sure, I can. I can do the one that I did for the Tapestry of Voices. What was that?
The one about your brother?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, do that.
Okay.
Yeah, do
Okay.
that.
So
Okay.
I wrote this poem last year, and it's about my brother, my family, and like mental health struggles. So I don't, I don't know where to look. I'm just gonna.
Is it okay sitting down?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
it's fine. It's fine. All right, it's called Haunted House. It was different when he came home this time. No one would say it aloud, they didn't need to. Even then, I could feel the air burn, dry lightning from the storm he brought with him. In my mind's eye, he was eternally young, golden-hearted and broad-shouldered, strong enough to tread these treacherous waters and his own. Atlas fell, taking my whole world with him. The dust makes my eyes water. I wish I didn't cry when I got mad. I don't know this angry man. I want the body snatcher to take him back, return the brother he stole. He used to be the Son and the Father. Now he is just the Spirit. Now there is a ghost in my home. No one would say it aloud, but we all heard the howling. He is trapped in the chest of a stranger. He is trying desperately to crawl his way through iron ribs. He is trying to live again. The door is shut, and the hallway is dark. The silence splits my ears. I hold my breath as I pass his cemetery. My lungs begin to burn. Yeah.
That is powerful. I see what you mean.
Oh my goodness.
And not only your writing, but your delivery, which you had mentioned before, how that's an important part, is wonderful. I can understand why you did really well in the readout.
Thank you.
And what is that experience like for you to do those slams and readouts?
Oh, it's one of my favorite things to do. I feel like when I recite, everything else kind of melts away, and it's kind of just, I get to be the version of myself that I choose, and I get to be the most confident and focused version of myself, and when you recite, it's really important that you have a connection to the words and you know what you're talking about. And I feel like everything I say when I recite is true, and even if it's not my own writing, I try to find that connection so that I can be honest when I recite. So.
Beautiful.
Want to hear her do a Langston Hughes one?
Oh my
It's
goodness.
not too long.
Just before we do that, I'd just like to touch a little bit more the poem that you just recited that you wrote. That because you had talked before about how poetry allows you to express things that were impossible in ordinary language, and that I worked for over 40 years in the mental health field with people with severe chronic mental illness, and that it was very touching for me to hear your poem because it really just brought to life the suffering of both those folks who are ill, but also of the families, seeing that disappearance of the person that they knew. So thank you very much for that.
Sure.
And I imagine the process of writing that, of reflecting and finding the words, help release some of the burden, some of the pain, and that's
Definitely.
some of the most helpful things about a spiritual life is going there and finding some way through. So, beautiful example.
Yeah, and I think, Ted, you sort of hit on another aspect of it, which is like the giving of it's like a gift to other people to hear
Yes.
that. And that is, I think an important piece of spirituality also, with the giving. That's really deep giving, I think, we have church bazaars and temple collections and things, but, it's like giving with capital letters.
Yeah, so some of the other paths that I mentioned to spiritual life is the arts, and here's actual participation. There's also viewing, reading, and then service. And so you're speaking about how when we give something that helps others, it lifts our spirit. You got one you want to share, Debbie?
Oh, I didn't bring anything I wrote. It's funny. I just at the last minute, which is the way I do things. I looked at things. I mean, there were two poems that. Well, there were a bunch that jumped at me. For some reason, this one, which I haven't read in a long time, came to me as something that you might enjoy. Well, it sort of touches on the spiritual. This is a poem by William Stafford, who was the U.S. Poet Laureate somewhere in the 20th century. The 20th century is kind of a blur now, but and it's called "You Reading This, Be Ready." Starting here, what do you want to remember? How sunlight creeps along a shining floor? What scent of old wood hovers? What softened sound from outside fills the air? Will you ever bring a better gift for the world than the breathing respect that you carry wherever you go right now? Are you waiting for time to show you some better thoughts? When you turn around, starting here, lift this new glimpse that you found, carry into evening all that you want from this day, this interval you spent reading or hearing this, keep it for life. What can anyone give you greater than now? Starting here, right in this room, when you turn around.
Very, very appropriate
Yeah,
to the topic.
I have a giant book of my favorite poems. It's like this notebook with like all these papers stuck in it, you know, and so it's all like falling apart. And I just thumb through it. And you know, if we need another one, I got another good one, which is for
Let's talk about that one a little bit,
Yeah.
because it certainly
Great poem, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And we talked about, you know, things that can't be well expressed in prose language, and some of that is emotional, but also a lot of that is spiritual, and that a part of the spiritual journey is the recognition that there are things that we actually cannot understand with our rational mind, and that poetry is much more effective at kind of pointing us to that area that's beyond rationality or speech or anything, but that there is just a felt sense that can be inspired by a poem like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly, that poem is certainly, you know, points in the same direction as the Vipassana or insight meditation practice that we
Right.
both share. You know, that it's all there in this moment.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what's so cool about it. Yeah, and I do, you know, I think in my mind, when I think of spirituality, not my own personal one, but just sort of the word, I think of like something up there or out there, or, you know, something distant that you can grasp for but never attain. But I mean, this poem is so beautiful, yeah, because of the message. I mean, what can anyone give you greater than now, starting here, right now in this room, when you turn around, you know, it's so immediate.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that is really the way I think poetry needs to be experienced. And part of the reason I think kids don't like it a lot, students don't like it a lot, is because there's such a fine line between dissecting it, because it's so rich and it's so much fun for some people like me to dissect. But usually we start class with a little meditation, and then I just read a poem, and then I kind of gag myself so that I don't ruin it for the kids, you know, because I want to talk about it. And sometimes I say a few words.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's so great about Poetry Soup is that, like, I know I'm in the class and I love to dissect a good poem and figure out what it's about. But I have friends who go just to listen, who don't write and don't have any interest in tearing apart a poem, but enjoy the experience of listening to other people share what's important to them. So I think that's a really cool part of it.
Yeah.
So, given what you just said, can you say a little bit, both of you, about the writing process? What it's like when you sit down with that blank piece of paper?
I think it's your turn to go first.
Very slick. Well, I don't think it's always the same. I know my idol, Rena Espaillat, who really is my total inspiration. You know,
Say who that is.
So Rena Espaillat lives here locally now. She was born in the Dominican Republic and came here when she was around 9 and taught public school in New York for a whole bunch of years, and is the sort of founder of the powwow Poets, who are a local group, from whom we get a lot of our guest speakers and a whole lot of support. And it's kind of like the Bloomsbury group. I don't know what happened, but all these poets have sort of gravitated to Newburyport, largely due to Rena, but really good poets. And I think she may be the one who first said to me, in some ways, a poem finds you. You don't find the poem finds you. Just a word, a phrase, you see something, you hear something, and you go, oh, that's like a poem, or it's got the potential to be a poem. So I think that's the way it usually is. Sometimes for me, people ask me to write things. At the Whittier home, where they have a celebration of John Greenleaf Whittier, they ask specifically for a poem that in response to a poem from Whittier. So then there's something more grounded, which sometimes I'll do with my students, write a response to this. Sometimes I'll just read a poem and want to write a response to it because I think it demands a response. But I don't write as much now as I have at other points in my life, and as I will maybe when I'm totally retired. We'll see. Rita's always after me to write more poetry, but your turn.
I mean, most of my writing comes from when I feel like I have something I need to write about or need to get out there, and it usually always starts like a just a rant, like it's just not anything coherent or nice and having any sort of convention at all. It kind of just is all on the page, and from there I had to. I mean, I organize myself, and I don't know. I definitely take a lot of inspiration from the people around me, and my friends and Szabo, I think, are probably some of my greatest inspirations. It's always like,
Washa.
But I don't know. When I get stuck, I take a walk, and that kind of makes everything clear what I need to say and how I need to say it.
Huh.
She walks a lot. I can attest to that.
Yeah.
She walks a lot.
So is it? God, I'm curious. So is it like something that is completed within a day, or is with a walk kind of clearing your mind, or is it? Are some poems more things that evolve over several days, or maybe even longer than that?
I guess it depends. I mean, all of my poems that I consider like finished, I mean, like have gone through several stages of revision. So some of the poems that I've written, especially group poems, those usually take a really long time to complete because you have so much going on and there's so many different things, and you just sort through like what do we really want to add and convey, and how do we want to say it, and that's a larger process.
That's a group actually.
Yeah.
Getting together and wow.
Yeah.
It's
a cool process, but it's difficult definitely. But I love doing that too. But
We'll see what she says at the end of the day. We're meeting
another one.
We have a meeting at 2:15 today.
Yeah. Sometimes when it's something really immediate that I want to get out, sometimes it doesn't take me very long at all. Like for Juneteenth, we did a group poem, and that took a really long time because we had to formulate all of it and make sure it was really what we wanted to say. But for that same event, I got a text 2 days prior to it from Szabo and from one of our favorite repeat guests of Poetry Soup, Harley 125, that they wanted me to write another poem for it that was an individual poem, and I did that like within the span of a couple hours and recited it there. So I think it just depends on what the poem is, I guess. Sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, so you're saying you sit down, you start writing, and then you feel like you need to get some inspiration, you go for a walk, and then things strike you.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you sit down again. Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I send her a whole bunch of notes.
And she said all of it.
Yeah. And then she says, here, it's finished. And then I go, no, it's not.
It gets raked through the coals. And then, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, so that's really cool. So you are a resource for Tuala in the writing, or
Yeah, but she's always allowed to reject my suggestions, which
right?
she does.
But you're there to offer it and to
Yeah.
be a sort of someone who's commenting in a way that's non-judgmental but helpful.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think all writers have writing groups or editors or just good friends or someone. I mean, it's really hard to. Once you've worked on something, it's really hard to have any objective vision of it. And also, of course, when you write something, you totally understand what you mean. And even if you read it to your best friend will probably totally understand what you mean. But it's good to know how it's received by somebody who's not your best friend.
Yes.
You're not my best friend, Szabo?
Oh, I'm not. Oh, I am, honey. Your best objective friend.
Okay, there we go.
So as we get shorter in time, I'd like you to each share whatever advice you have for people to lift their spirits through writing or anything else you want to mention.
I would say go to poetry readings as much as you can. The Powwow poets have readings. I believe it's every month. You could look them up online, and their poetry readings are really good. And there are lots of slams and more modern kind of hip things. You kind of usually have to go to Boston or Cambridge for those. But the more you listen, the more you'll, I think, learn, and the more you'll enjoy it. And as we said before, just be open, be receptive, and see what happens. That would be, that's the best I got.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I'd say just find the things you like to do and the people around you that make you feel most like yourself. I guess you can't really, lift your spirits if you're trying to fit into a box you don't fit in.
You mentioned the word hip, so I just want
It's like a word from the 60s. I'd rather you didn't bring it up again as it was coming out. I was
I'm taking it to today, hip hop.
Oh,
So that's all poetry, it seems to me.
Oh, well, there's a whole other, spoken word grew out of hip hop. There's a brand new book, which we're going to order for the school library, by Joshua Bennett, who is, about spoken word, and it's been reviewed, very well reviewed, in the New York Times and in the Globe. Yeah, so, hip hop was kind of, brought spoken word out a lot more, and then, of course, Amanda Gorman did a whole lot for it. But it's been around forever. We used to have we're having a poetry slam at the Mass Poetry Festival, May 6th, we can plug that, at 3 o'clock. There's going to be a youth slam. 5 high school teams are going to have a slam. So, yeah, spoken word and hip-hop is, it's just like anything else. There's great spoken word and great hip-hop, and then there's kind of just yelling and emoting, and there's that too, which is okay. There's a place for that. I can get a little snobby, but I won't. But there's certainly lots of wonderful, spoken word and lots of wonderful hip hop.
With respect to that May 6th slam, do you want to give the details on how people would...
It's part of the Mass Poetry Festival. Oh, that's a good idea, which everybody can go to. It's May 6th. It's in Salem, and there are a lot of wonderful events. I know the youth slam is from 3 to 6, and it's at the cinema there, the East Salem Cinema. But I'm sure if you Google Mass Poetry, that's going to be a big event, May 6th.
Okay,
Which will be
that's
wonderful.
good to know.
Until you have a trip coming up to Washington?
No.
Oh, no.
No?
If I'm an alternate for it, so,
Okay.
but I don't know.
So does that mean someone has to drop
Be heard.
out?
Yeah.
Someone has to be heard.
Sometimes you're an alternate for something like jury duty, and
Yeah.
you actually show up,
Yeah,
and
no,
then
Yeah.
but you don't get the trip to Washington unless you're going to be reading your poetry.
Yes.
But I don't think you want to end this program without hearing her do the thanks
Okay.
and views.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
great.
I mean, I've got a nice one too, but I forget it.
Yeah, why don't we end
Yeah.
with that? That
We
would
can't
be
do
wonderful.
two, right? We can only do one.
Well,
Do we have time for two or
Yeah,
one?
we have time for
5
two.
minutes. Yeah, we have time
Okay.
to do.
You think we can do both?
I
Because you
don't
have to
know.
go last. Okay, all right.
Go.
Okay, I'm going to go. I can't read it fast. But it's very interesting because this was my second pick. This is a poem by Robert Hayden, and it's called Frederick Douglass, and it's obviously about Frederick Douglass. Okay. But it's not just about Frederick Douglass. When it is finally ours, this freedom, this liberty, this beautiful and terrible thing, needful to man as air, usable as earth, when it belongs at last to all, when it is truly instinct, brain matter, diastole, systole, reflex action, when it is finally one, when it is more than the gaudy mumbo-jumbo of politicians, this man, this Douglas, this former slave, this Negro beaten to his knees, exiled, visioning a world where none is lonely, none hunted, alien. This man, superb in love and logic, this man shall be remembered. Oh, not with statues' rhetoric, not with legends and poems and wreaths of bronze alone, but with the lives grown out of his life, the lives flushing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really, I could talk about it forever, and I won't. But I thought about when you were talking, Ted, about, I love that superb in love and logic, and that's what it is. It's like the whole thing, right? And the whole idea just of freedom. There has to be freedom. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything else because I really want you to hear.
Okay.
And well, I will say one thing. And the way this poem makes you feel the connection through Frederick Douglass, in the 1880s, whatever, through Robert Hayden in the 1960s, through to us here
Yes.
in 2023.
Yes.
It's mind-boggling. And a mumbo-jumbo of politicians. It's mind-boggling. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, so this was one of the poems that I did for Poetry Out Loud. It is. Oh my God.
Okay, I'm good.
It's called "The Negro Speaks of Rivers" by Langston Hughes. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunlight. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can see why you chose to have Tuala finish with that
Yeah, I
one.
was gonna read anything. Yeah.
If that's not a spiritual experience, I don't know what is. So thank you so much for being here with us and sharing so openly and beautifully.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for being with us. And the show is available through the Hub website after the show on YouTube and on SoundCloud. So go to the Hub site to find those. And read some poetry and go to some poetry events or any creative writing experience and try your own to lift your spirit.